Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the July 7th meeting, virtual meeting of the Raleigh City Council. We are going to start today with recognition of special awards. I'm going to hand this over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The first item here is really quite an exciting recognition for our transit system. North Carolina Public Transit Association has awarded Go Raleigh with 2 awards. And to give additional information on that, we have Michael Moore, who's going to tell you a little bit more about that. So Michael Moore, Transportation Director.
Thank you, Ruffin. As the manager said, Go Raleigh has won 2 statewide awards: North Carolina Transit for the North Carolina Transit System of the Year Award and a Safety Award, both presented by the North Carolina Public Transportation Association. The winners were selected by a national independent evaluation committee that was chaired by the NCPTA executive director and then comprised of media and trade association professionals. The Transit System of the Year Award is given to a transit system that is best represents the public transportation industry in the state. It recognizes promoting mobility and removing barriers that cause isolation and promotes economic growth while providing safe, efficient, and reliable services. Go Raleigh's 2019 accomplishments noted in the submission included our largest one-year expansion of service, larger than any in the previous decade. And then also that the compressed natural gas fueling station was also brought online. This saved 120,000 gallons of diesel fuel, and which we all know compressed natural gas is a cleaner burning fuel, so helped us with that. And that was just within the first 6 months, that savings of 120,000 gallons. We also changed policy to reduce the thresholds for minimum ridership by which we would include different transit amenities like shelters and benches. And I would really like to thank Council for their engagement on that particular policy change. I think it makes a huge difference to the comfort and the attractiveness of the system. The Safety Award is one for which I'd like to say we're particularly proud. While the Transportation System of the Year Award is great, it is kind of judged by a group of your peers. The Safety Award is purely metrics. It is based on a ratio of accidents per mileage, regardless of the preventability of those accidents. And it really is a testimony to the great work of the staff of Go Raleigh. We have 305 people engaged in safety every day. It includes bus operators and mechanics, utility workers, janitors and cleaners, road and shop supervisors, dispatchers, and support staff, all of which are dedicated to safety and superior customer service. And this really, again, is a testimony to the great work that they do. In closing, I'd like to just recognize the leadership of David Eatman, who's our Assistant Director for Transit and Transportation, and Marie Parker, who is the General Manager of Go Raleigh. It's also important to recognize the kind of contributions and dedicated staff of Go Raleigh. I just want to use one example. Some of you may know Sharita McCullers. Sharita is a bus operator, and she was a former Transit Authority member. She's had 25 years of accident-free service. And again, you don't do that casually, and you don't do that by accident. You do that by attention to detail every single day. And I just want to say thank you to all of them. So again, we have plaques. We can put them on display. And I just want to say thank you to the staff, and thank you to the Go Raleigh operators, and thank you to Council.
Awesome. Congratulations, Michael. That is great. Great news. Councilor Branch, you are the liaison to the Raleigh Transit Authority. I'm sure you have some strong feelings about this, especially since you also served on the Transit Authority.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, first, I just want to thank our operators and mechanics. They're the ones that are out there, make sure the buses are safe. They're the ones moving our citizens throughout the city of Raleigh. The staff over there at within the building, supporting them and giving them everything they need. And our city of Raleigh staff, for being the leaders and stepping in and working through the challenges that we face, but making sure that the system is safe and reliable. And I just want to say thank you for your continued work and support. And we look for many more years of receiving these awards, which means the bars are being raised high.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Our next item is the consent agenda. No items were pulled. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Remember the rules. Raise your hand. I'll call on you. Councilor Branch?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Do we have a second? Councilor Stewart? Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that is a unanimous vote. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission. Ken Bowers.
Good afternoon, Ken Bowers from Planning and Development. And here are the slides, just letting you know at present we have a few items on the report today to be scheduled. Recommendation is scheduled for September 1st public hearing, and there's currently only one item on that agenda, so there should be plenty of room for the 4 items we have. Next, please. Okay, so here are the 4 items that we're recommending for a September 1st, 2020 public hearing, and I'll read through all of them so you could. Oh, great, thank you. So if you desire, you may schedule them all with one motion. There's Z5319, 5512 Thornton Road in District B. This received a favorable recommendation, but on a split vote from the Planning Commission for approval, and we're recommending the September 1st public hearing. Z5119, 3700 and 3800 Glenwood Avenue in District E. This had a unanimous recommendation for approval. This case is rezoning some already built areas off of Glenwood Avenue just inside the belt line to allow more mix of uses. TC 720 is a text change authorized back late winter, early spring by City Council, clarifying the definition and changing the definition of mezzanines in the code and setting forth standards for how mezzanines are allowed in buildings and whether or not they count as a story. And then Z4719, 4800 Durley Road in District E, was reported out without a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The vote was split between those who were in favor and those opposed to the case, and so it passed out of the Planning Commission without a specific recommendation.
Okay. Ken, if you could take down the, thank you. I can only see a few people when that's up. So is there, this is set where we can make a motion to approve all 4 for public hearing. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilor Melton, do I have a second? Councilor Knight. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously.
Okay. Presentation. So 4 more items to address. We have, you can flip through these. Thank you. Oh, I can flip through them. So we have some items requested, 4 items requested for time extensions. The Z1719 Capitol Boulevard was requested for a 60-day time extension. The deadline for action is August 10th. The Planning Commission would like an additional 60 days due to the complexity of the case. This is located at the interchange of P Street and Capitol Boulevard, and then they have requested 30-day extensions for 3 pending cases: Z5019 on Method Road, Z820 on Carolina Avenue, and Z1220 on Prince Drive.
Ken, do you want to run through all of them and then we'll come back?
Excuse me?
Would you run through all of these?
Yes.
And then we'll come back.
Those are all the requests for time extensions. These are the slides showing where the items are located and the nature of the requests. What further information can I provide you with?
The 60-day extension, I'm guessing, is because this is a complex case.
That's correct. There's a number of transportation issues that are still being worked on with the applicant.
Okay. And then the other extensions, Councilor Melton, did you have concern about Prince Drive, was it?
Someone from representing the applicant, or I guess the developer, reached out with concerns about, I think they were on Planning Commission's agenda twice. The first time was right around when COVID hit, another time was in June, and then I think maybe a third time. I think they're concerned that their case isn't getting heard. I know that Planning Commission has a lot of work on their plate. I'm wondering if we can just go ahead and set it for public hearing and ask that they take this up at the next meeting. I just said I would raise that issue. I don't pretend to understand what's causing the delay.
Perhaps, Ken, you could provide some background.
This case is yet to be discussed at Planning Commission. They have had, as you know, a heavy agenda working through a backlog of items from the initial break in the pandemic, plus it has been the case that the discussion at the Planning Commission has taken longer for each item, and so fewer items are able to be heard in a given meeting. The Planning Commission, of course, has been making very diligent efforts to work through their agendas, including scheduling a special meeting a week ago to get to some additional items. There were a number of text changes as well as zoning cases that they were working on, which is why we have 9 items to report today.
Okay, Ken, if you could take down the that information. Thank you. So does anybody have any issues or concerns with those recommendations or requests? All right, then I will entertain a motion on Capitol Boulevard for a 60-day extension.
I move for approval.
Okay, do we have a second? Councilor Cox. Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, passes unanimously, clerk. The next item was the rezoning on Carolina. Wait a minute, no. Let me see. There was all 3 of them: Method Road, Prince Drive, and Carolina Avenue. Do we have a motion to approve those 3 30-day extensions? Councilor Cox? Councilor Branch seconds that. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. There's one further item. It's not, I don't believe, does not have a slide, but the Planning Commission did request that council consider authorizing a text change to look at the limitations on outdoor seating for bars and restaurants in the NX and OX districts. This issue arose during their review of the rezoning at 3800 Glenwood Avenue. Currently, the code provides for fairly limited outdoor seating, and this is not to be confused with outdoor dining in the public right-of-way. This would be outdoor dining on site on the property where the restaurant is. And the reason for that was to limit noise impacts when proximate to residential areas. However, given the shift to outdoor dining for restaurants during the pandemic, they thought it would be worthwhile to look at changing that number of outdoor seats allowed. They have not recommended a specific number, but they did forward a recommendation to the to the city council to consider authorizing a text change.
Well, I think it's certainly worth having a discussion on,
Right.
you know, going forward. I think, you know, obviously our world has changed. We don't know that there will be impacts for a long time to come. So if everybody's okay with authorizing that, Councilor Stewart?
I do have a question. I wonder if a text change is the best way to do this, or an ordinance would make more sense. And excuse me,
Because the standards are tied to the zoning district and they're part of the UDO, I don't believe there's any way to change them other than a text change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Now, if the council's option is that you could authorize the text change now, not knowing exactly what the contents of it might be, other than that the general intent is to increase the amount of outdoor seating, or you could ask for us to report back at your next meeting, which would be August 18th, on a staff recommendation based on some research as to what that number would be before making an authorization. In all likelihood, the impact on the timing of actually passing the text change would probably not be large, again, given the number of items in front of it at the Planning Commission.
Can I ask a question related to this? You know, there are buildings, you know, what's becoming more common is buildings having outdoor areas. So outdoor, like offices having outdoor areas for seating, on roofs or, you know, mezzanine areas, whatnot. Is there a way to look into expanding that option as well? I know that for some existing buildings, this presents some challenges with the way the code currently is written. Any thoughts on that, Ken?
That's a broader issue, I think. The code section that the Planning Commission was focused on specifically was outdoor seats for eating and drinking establishments in specific zoning districts. In terms of the ability to do outdoor, upper level outdoor amenity areas that may or may not be used for commercial purposes, but would have, say, outdoor seating or open space, I think is a separate question that would delve a little bit more into the way the city currently regulates open space, particularly in the downtown district, as well as other mixed-use settings, which essentially disincentivize the provision of upper level open space because there's a desire to have it at the curb level. So those are things that we could report back on as well at the request of council.
Okay.
If I understood your question
Yes,
correctly, which I think
you did. Thank you. So could we look at those two issues and get a report back from the Planning Commission at our next meeting?
yes, that should be sufficient time.
Now, I'm looking for some feedback here. Councilor Knight, you had your hand
Yeah,
raised.
I do think there's a timeliness issue here, it seems to me. I would like this to be moved forward as quickly as possible. So it sounds like, Ken, you're saying there's the two options, there's not a big time difference, but I hate for this to get held up behind other items that may not have quite the timeliness issue on them, or more specific than this, getting held up behind those issues at the Planning Commission. So I'd like this to move as quickly as possible.
Councilor Cox?
Yeah, I know this is for outdoors, but are there any fire code or safety issues involved?
This really isn't a fire code, or it doesn't address occupancy level per se, and it's the intent of the current standard aimed at drinking establishments is that outdoor areas tend to generate noise just from conversation if there's enough people gathered, and it was to limit the size of those outdoor gatherings when within a certain distance of residential. So that was the intent behind it, but it does make it more difficult under current conditions for certain types of drinking establishments to operate if people feel safer out of doors, or they are safer out of doors. And if that's the only way that folks can gather, it means that if you're impacted by this standard, that you are limited in that regard.
So will you be looking at noise requirements and amplified music and other issues such as that?
This would not change any of the standards related to amplified music, which is a separate regulation.
Okay, but it could.
Excuse me?
It could. I mean, if we were to write it into the code, I mean, we could specify additional requirements regarding noise and amplified music. Is that correct?
We could look at that as part of this as well.
Okay.
So if there is a desire to look narrowly at the issue of outdoor seating for drinking establishments and move that quickly, that is a possibility. And we could also, of course, look at the larger issue as it related to standards for outdoor open space and report back on that separately.
Councilor Melton?
I agree with Councilor Knight that I think at least on the part regarding the outdoor seating for our restaurants and businesses that was requested that we look at by Planning Commission, I think we should go ahead and just move forward that text change. Because it's a text change, it's going to have to go through a public process. But
Would someone like to make a motion?
well, I will. I move to authorize that text change, but then I think the other issues that Councilor Cox raised and that you raised, Mayor, could maybe be a report from staff if we want to authorize additional text changes.
Yeah.
But I think the one that they raised, we can go ahead and move that issue.
Yes, I'm asking for just a report so I can better understand that. This would be authorizing a text change for maximum limit on allowed outdoor seating.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay. That's Councilor Knight. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. That will move forward. And then Ken, if you could, if council is okay with this, I would like for us to get a report back at our August meeting on amenity space and buildings.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Mayor, also, if they can let us know what the long-term impact, like post-COVID, we do this text change. What does this text change? Will it change anything that we have in place once we're past the pandemic?
Okay.
All right.
That wraps it up. There was only one other point of information. The Planning Commission has initiated a discussion on equity issues as it relates to their work in the comprehensive plan. They received a presentation from Dr. Caesar on the city's participation in the North Carolina cohort of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and we'll be continuing that exploration in committee at some upcoming meetings. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There's several items on your agenda today. The first is an update on the COVID-19 situation, and specifically today, we're going to talk about the impacts associated with special events. Before you hear a little bit of the presentation, I also just wanted to confirm that our proposal is to continue your virtual council meetings through August. You're getting ready to go into sort of a 6-week break, and then there's an August meeting. August 18th is your scheduled meeting. Then we would suggest that you continue the meetings virtually through that point, and again, you can continue to reconsider future meetings. So I just wanted to put that out there and hear if there's any objections to that approach. Please let us know. Ultimately, it's the mayor and council's decision. So with that, I'll turn it over to Derek Reamer with our Office of Emergency Management and Special Events to update you on the situation and to talk specifically today about special events.
Great. Thank you, Ruffin. Again, Derek Kramer, Office of Emergency Management and Special Events. I'm going to give a quick overview of our COVID status and then talk specifically about special events, where we are now and where we're going. This is more of an informational presentation. Much of what we're going to discuss today can be accomplished administratively, but because of the impacts of them, we wanted to make sure that you were aware. Currently in Wake County, there are a little over 6,000 cases. We continue to see a growth in those cases overall within Wake County. The hospitalizations within Wake County, the downward trend you see there with that yellow dotted line is slightly downward, but as you can see, since July 2nd, the number of hospitalizations are starting to tick back up. That's even more prevalent when you look at the state as a whole. Our rolling average of the number of cases continues to go up, and so does the number of lab-confirmed cases. Similarly, when you look at hospitalizations across the state, that number is continuing to rise as well. So where we are currently on mass gatherings, and remember a lot of this is based off of recommendations and requirements that the governor has set forth. During phase 1 of the state's reopening plan, there was no more than 10 people inside or outside. When we moved into phase 2, that did allow for 25 people outdoors, but kept the 10 people gathering limit on indoors. And wherever possible, we do try to align with the state, but that is not always the case. So currently, all of our special events have been postponed since March 14th, and they have been canceled all the way through July 17th. Throughout this time, we've had ongoing conversations with our event organizers and even told all of the organizers that have events through October that the likelihood of them happening is slim. A number of those spring events postponed to the fall and are likely going to have to now postpone again. One thing we did hold was a special events community engagement meeting just a couple weeks ago, where we hosted and provided a platform for 35 event organizers and community stakeholders to come together to discuss their concerns, their challenges, and some best practices. And a lot of that information we gathered will be integrated into our special events guidelines for when special events are able to happen. So some of the big cancellations we've seen so far over the spring and summer can include Dreamville Festival. Packapalooza is already canceled, which is in August. IBMA, as you've all heard. These are just a number of the larger festivals, and there's likely about 3 times as many smaller festivals that have also been canceled or have to been postponed. There are still a number of events, however, that remain on our calendar, and many of them are waiting for us to make a decision as to their fate. But before we make any decision about events, we need to remember that and do it with the 3 goals that we have stated every week up here, and keep that in mind. We're going to do everything we can to help slow the spread of COVID-19. We're going to continue to provide great service for our community, and we're going to achieve goals 1 and 2 by being supportive of each other and working as a team and treating each other like good neighbors. So, as I said, here's our recommendations. There's no action needed from council, but certainly would like to hear your feedback if you have any concerns. We are proposing to cancel all festivals, road races, and parades through the end of October. It's important to note that this does not include anything in Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources or the Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Complex. And one of the reasons why these are different than those 2 entities are the majority of the special events that happen are non-ticketed general admission events that are open to the public, where it makes it just extremely difficult to control crowd size, provide wellness screenings, and ensure the safety of everybody there. That might be more feasible in a parks program or convention center programming if and when they are allowed to do so based off of any mass gathering limits set forth by the state. But it's important to note that those are separate and apart from this conversation today. We will consider events with 25 attendees or less. One of the main examples you'll see this are with neighborhood block parties. Again, we want to continue people still being able to be outside and having a sense of neighborly exchanges as everybody's been cooped up inside over the past couple of months. And then we will make a decision on events beyond October 31st, no later than September 1st. Some of the major events that will be impacted by this cancellation include Boogaloo, the Race 13-1 Fall Festival, Artsplosion, the Walk for Hope, Q-Grass, and a number of other nonprofit walks and races that happen mainly throughout our fall schedule. When we decide to start thinking about the future of special events and what that'll look like if we proceed past October 31st, we want to see those cases declining or reaching sustainable levels here in North Carolina and in Wake County. Obviously, the statewide restrictions on mass gatherings would have to have been eased. And again, do they meet our goal of reducing the spread of the virus? When we slowly start to introduce those back into our culture, we want to make sure that the safety of the event organizers, staff, volunteers, and again, that general public who just might be walking by are taken into account. We will look very closely at national, regional, and local standards and safety protocols. We'll use some of that information we got from our community engagement meeting, where we got that information directly from our event organizers, and make sure that they understand they'll now be responsible for implementing a number of these safety procedures. Some of those safety procedures, if and when we start having events again, will be requirements of face coverings, additional PPE measures such as disposable gloves, face shields, goggles, any type of requirement that we would see as a recommendation from our state and local authorities. We would want to make sure that we incorporate those into our events. Hand washing and sanitizing stations galore, wellness screenings, and making sure that we can abide by any social distancing measures that need to be taken. And finally, moving forward, again, we want to make sure that we have that significant reduction in our confirmed cases because we're really focused on the safety and well-being of our community. And some of the examples we've talked about that you've seen of that are Southeast Raleigh Mass Distribution Pilot Project. We've got a couple other projects in the works right now that hopefully we'll be able to announce soon. And also our Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources staff is continuing to work with the Wake County Public School System as they continue to struggle over the decisions on how they're going to open up schools this year. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Derek? Councilor Stewart.
Thank you for this. I have a clarifying question that a constituent asked about private events such as new kind of craft markets that are new or existing craft markets that are happening on private property. I'm assuming that these guidelines do not impact those, though I'm not sure that they would necessarily be within ordinance now anyway. So thoughts?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Anything on private property, this would not affect. These are for those special events that occur on city right-of-way, our city plazas in downtown, Market Plaza, Exchange Plaza, those public areas are what this would apply to, nothing on private property.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so Derek, are you looking for emotion from us?
Mayor, I'll answer that. Yeah, at this point, no, we're going to go ahead and proceed. So I guess this would be without objection. We'll simply move forward with that particular plan. We just wanted to make sure the council was aware, and if you had any significant concerns, we would react to that. I would like to take a moment to say thank you to Derek and his entire team. They have been working consistently and regularly with these event organizers throughout the process. So this is not going to be a surprise. I think it's fair to say that we are all sad and disappointed that we are in this circumstance. You don't want to kind of walk past the fact that some of these various festivals, whether it's downtown or out in the community, are part of our vibrant culture and vibrant community. And so that's really difficult to have to not be able to do that. But I think because there's been so much regular engagement with these groups, I think they do understand. But let's just admit, let's just recognize, but we're all saddened by it. So but it's necessary given the set of circumstances.
Unfortunately, yes.
So, Mayor, with that, I will go to our next item on the manager's report. Next is affordable housing. This is with regards to the Summit at Sawyer and Toulon Place developments. These are affordable housing projects that you have previously approved. And as you may recall, these projects, once you approve them, they then go through the process of receiving the tax credits and then going to the equity market to try to fund the pro forma that is put in place. Obviously, at the national level, with these disruptions and the credit market's response, some of those assumptions have not panned out. So the project will need additional money in order to achieve the affordable housing goals that you have set forward. So wanted to have Larry Jarvis with Housing and Neighborhoods just give you a real quick update and ask for your approval. Mr. Jarvis.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. I think the city manager just sum things up very well. With the economic impacts associated with COVID, equity markets have taken a tumble. I think it was several weeks ago, I forget the particular agenda item, but we did allude to the fact that a lot of the things we had in the pipeline were going to be impacted by the downturn in equity markets. Just a reminder, these two projects, these are very important projects to the city. Sawyer Road, of course, is city-owned property on Sawyer Road. We went through a RFP process to select the developer, and Toulon represents the redevelopment of Brown Birch. So we would ask council to approve this additional funding. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Council Branch.
Yes, I just want to thank staff for continuing to work to push these projects forward. They will definitely help in the redevelopment of what was Brown Birch, which is now will be Toulon Place, that was literally falling apart and falling down. Was over 50% vacant at the time. But now we can put some affordable housing in place of it and help those who need housing. So I move for approval.
Do I have a second? Councilor Stewart? Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Clerk, that was a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Third item is an update and then a request for approval to modify the scope of a critical bicycle project. So this is the Lumley Westgate Ebenezer Church Road bicycle project. It's pretty significant from our previous transportation bonds. And we have an original scope associated with the project, and we need to revise that scope and then break it into pieces in order to be able to do that with the budget amount that we have available. So with that, Kenneth Ritchie is here from Engineering Services to give you an update and would ask for your approval. Mr. Ritchie.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Kenneth Ritchie with Engineering Services here to provide an update on the Lumley Westgate Ebenezer Church Road Bicycle Improvements Project. A little bit of background on this project. The project evolved from the Triangle Commuter Bike Initiative as a long-term vision to connect residents of Raleigh and Durham to RTP. And this initiative has informed a lot of the plans that have kind of dictated our bicycle and pedestrian plans for the city. A little bit of project history. This project and this initiative does date back to 2009 when the city adopted the comprehensive bicycle plan. And then with the 2011 transportation bond, the Lumley Westgate Corridor Greenway project was included with that effort. June of 2014, council authorized Stewart Engineering to move forward with a feasibility study on the Lumley Westgate project. In the course of that study, it was identified and the scope was expanded to include Ebenezer Church Road as a means of providing safe bicycle access to Umstead State Park. The feasibility study was completed in December of 2015. And then in June of 2016, design services were initiated with Stewart Engineering. During the course of that, it was looking to identify the different facility types that we could implement within the corridor to provide that safe access along these heavily traveled corridors. 2018, February was our first public engagement, and later that year was our second 65% public engagement. Some of the key takeaways from that public engagement were there was significant amount of project support.
The highest level of support coming out of that was with regards to improving access to William B. Umstead State Park, improving safety for bicycling and walking, and making connections in greater North Raleigh to improve the bicycle and pedestrian network. Certainly this has played into how we have moved forward with the project. And certainly there were some concerns that were raised out of that. One of those concerns was with regards to impacts to properties, specifically along Ebenezer Church Road, south of US 70. This is in the Metro Park Overlay District, and traditionally under that, the cross section would have called for a ditch section with sidewalk on the backside, which did push that infrastructure deeper into the properties during that stakeholder meeting. Coming out of that, we were able to work with planning to determine that there was the ability to introduce curb and gutter through this section, which allowed us to bring that cross section back in, much to the support of the neighbors along that section. And then that resulted in a design change during 2019. In addition, there's been ongoing coordination with NCDOT. Westgate, Lumley, and Ebenezer Church Road are all NCDOT facilities, so we will require approval from them with anything that we propose to move forward with. In addition to the RDU Airport, which does have long-term plans for a potential realignment of Lumley Road to facilitate expansion of their runway, and with the Martin Marietta realignment of Westgate Road that occurred a couple years ago. Looking at the project scope, the budget for this project is a little over $2.4 million, and it seeks to install bicycle facilities on Lumley Road, Westgate Road, and Ebenezer Church Road, between Briar Creek Parkway, Leesville Road, and then to William B. Umstead State Park. The three different types of facilities that are proposed for the project are buffered bike lanes, and this would be on a majority of the project. Multi-use paths. There are some sections that we're looking to increase the pedestrian facilities as well as the available bicycle facilities. And then advisory bike lanes, and this section will be specific to the Grayland Drive section right at the entrance to the park. So this visual kind of provides an overview of the cost per segment, as well as the total cost of the project. As alluded to with the scope, the budget for this project is about $2.4 million. The total estimated project cost is about a little under $5.9 million. Certainly some items of coordination that we continue to work on with regards to Section 1 specifically is that future realignment for RDU. And the quarry realignment, that was pulled from this scope. When they implemented that realignment, they actually went and did a wider outside lane to accommodate both bikes and vehicles through that section. And they also installed sidewalk along that. And then certainly the two segments, segment 4, which is Ebenezer Church Road from Westgate to Marvino Lane, that would propose buffered bike lanes. Segment 5, which includes Grayland and Ebenezer south of Marvino, would look to install multi-use path and the advisory bike lanes. As part of that public feedback, that did educate us in terms of how to look at prioritizing the segments given the budget gap with regards to the overall project. As alluded to with that public feedback, one of the big points we got was the safe access to Umstead State Park. And certainly that kind of influenced the look at prioritizing sections 4 and 5, which is Ebenezer Church Road from Westgate into the park. And then certainly the additional sections, ongoing coordination throughout those sections with both NCDOT and other agencies in terms of future plans. With regards to our project schedule, we've got the update that we're providing to you today. With your approval to move forward, we will look at completing property acquisition and advertising for bids in the early winter of 2021. Looking to award construction and notice to proceed later in the winter of 2021 and looking to complete the project in the spring of 2022. So with that, the staff recommendations would be to complete final design and construct segments 4 and 5. This is the Ebenezer Church Road, Grayland Drive sections from Westgate Road to Umstead State Park. With contingency, the estimated cost does show a little bit, about 10%, about 15% higher than the total funding currently available. But we do have contingencies in both property acquisition and construction, and certainly what we're experiencing with a favorable construction market that does give us some positive that we can bring this in for the allocated funding. And then to defer segments 1, 2, and 3, continue the efforts with NCDOT and RDU, and look at future capital improvement programs to bring those 3 sections to implementation. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take those.
Very good presentation. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councilor Buffkin and then Councilor Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ritchie, for your presentation. My question's really broader than this project, and I'm very pleased to see this moving forward. I actually biked out there this past weekend, and this is a very important connection for most of North Raleigh to get over to Umstead. It provides an alternative to Crabtree Creek Trail, and that trail's had some troubles lately. But anyway, my real question is, I noted that it looks like we're going on now 12 years of this project. Is this a typical kind of timeline, or is this project unusual? And sort of, I guess the second part is, if this is a typical experience, I'd love to know what we could do as a council to help move these projects along a little faster.
I would certainly say this is not typical for a project to last 12 years. I think certainly you look at the delay in starting the feasibility study. It was first initiated with the 11 bond, and then really kind of cycled in for implementation in 14. There was a number of, when you start getting into public engagement, and certainly the changes that were late in the process with regards to the Metro Park residents, I think that has played into the delay, but certainly I don't think this timeline is typical of project delivery.
Thank you.
Councilor Stewart?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Buffkin, for that question. That was one that was on my mind. And thank you for the presentation, Mr. Ritchie. One of the questions I have, and I think it's due to the delay, is, and I'm not necessarily looking to hold this up, but rather I feel it's a responsibility to ask the question, who are we building this for? It feels, I'm just unsure why this is a priority in this moment. So I don't know if it's more of a historical question, I suppose, than any kind of finger pointing, but.
I certainly think that moving forward with the 2 sections that were identified, certainly I think it does stand to benefit the residents along that corridor, but certainly does set the stage for further enhancing our bicycle and pedestrian connections in that area to Umstead Park, and then ultimately across the entire northwest of the city. I think with this, it does kind of establish that entranceway for safe bicycle and pedestrian movements into the park that can be further connected to with future efforts.
Okay, I still have some questions, but thank you.
Councilor Knight?
Thank you. This is, a lot of this is in my district, and I just responded. I think this is an area that's been under utilized or focused on. So I really support this moving forward. I do also wish it could have moved along faster, and it will continue to move along faster. So to that point, when you say defer segments 1, 2, and 3, and I see the bullet point under that, give me a little bit more information about what do you, and again, I know you're sort of looking out in the future and estimating, but how long would that deferring be, and would that mean it would have to come underneath another bond to be paid for, or is that funding there? It would just be prolonged a bit because of the situation we're in.
I think that transportation.
Lost you.
We lost you.
Sorry about that. We'll need to coordinate with the transportation department, and we can report back to you on that.
Mayor, if I could help with that.
Yes.
Councilmember Knight, the short answer is yes, that ultimately you would have to identify additional funding in the future to advance the project. There are, again, a variety of choices that could come to that, whether it's a future transportation bond, it could reallocate from existing capital projects. There's always opportunities to try to leverage grants. Obviously, NCDOT is in a mode right now of making pretty serious budgetary reductions. So at this exact moment, that doesn't seem like a path that's going to be really feasible. But the short version is that in order to advance the project moving forward, you would have to identify an additional funding source. So when Mr. Ritchie references transportation, he's talking about transportation planning and all the various transportation funding possibilities there are, but it would require additional funding to advance the project.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I do support your recommendation, and I do think the focus should be, as much as possible, getting more access to Umstead through our greenways and bikeways. So I think that's good that you're prioritizing 4 and 5, but there is still a need out there to complete this, and I hope we can figure out a way to do it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
So this is for information purposes, no motion required, correct?
Mayor, I do believe there is a motion in your packet to approve the process that we've outlined moving forward. I need to confirm that, but let me make sure. I mean, I don't think you need to read it out, but basically the motion is to direct staff to proceed as Mr. Ritchie has outlined in the presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't have that in my backup. Okay, do we have a motion? Councilor Knight?
So moved. I moved to follow the staff recommendations.
Do we have a second? Councilor Buffkin? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that was unanimous.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. The next item is something that the staff as well as the council have been working on for quite a while. And so we're pleased to bring this question and update before you today. This has to do with zoning and equitable development around transit and the process for revising the overlay. So while that sounds a little bit complicated, I think it's fair to say this is a really critical path that the council would choose in terms of how you're going to try to achieve your policy goals in a transit corridor. And I won't steal the thunder of the presentation. What I would ask is that we do get some kind of direction from council today. That motion could be fairly informal, but I do think we do need that direction to figure out what path you may wish to take. I think the staff has done a really nice job of laying out what some of those options are, and we do have a preference, but perhaps it's not ironclad as a recommendation. So this is a get to the same place together. For the purposes of perhaps citizens who might be watching from home, we're about to embark, I think, on a whole new approach with regards to density and transit using our bus rapid transit lines. And the development associated with those areas are really critical to try to achieve both affordable housing and access and public transportation goals. So this is an important set of decisions that you have in front of you, and this is really just one of those steps. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason Harden with Planning and Development to give you a brief presentation and look for your feedback.
Thanks. And I do have some slides that I'll go through to provide a little bit more information about the topic. So it does involve thinking about how to realize the benefits of the city's transit investment, particularly in the bus rapid transit corridors, and going back in the current moment facing the COVID virus and thinking about the best path to applying and revising this transit overlay district. So you may recall there was some discussion on this topic in February and consideration about applying the existing overlay along New Bern Avenue and a portion of the Western BRT corridor. Direction was to return with a more specific recommended process for how to map this. It will be a fairly elaborate public process to provide new zoning on several hundred new parcels. So set to provide that update in April as we were well into the COVID era, and paused for a moment to get a sense of how long lasting this would be. And it's beginning to look obviously like it's a more lasting moment than anybody had hoped for. And so that's led to a point where it's reasonable to reconsider at least the sequence of events in how we get to the same end goal that I think council has identified. So it generally involves the difficulty of having kind of in-person meetings that we would typically have with a large-scale rezoning, and thinking about the difficulties in doing that without in-person information exchange opportunities, purely remotely, involving, again, several hundred parcels and notification letters that would go out to several thousand properties. So to get right to the point, if the desire is to continue with the overlay, then the staff recommendation is to revise it first, which has always been envisioned as a part of this process to make it do more of what I think the city wants it to do, and using the recommendations for the equitable development around transit study, which is nearly complete. So staff believes that those revisions, that's a text change essentially. So there are some public elements to that, but something that would be much simpler to handle in a remote meeting format than a large scale rezoning. So just a couple slides about what the existing overlay district does and what it doesn't do, and some of the recommendations from equitable development. So again, this isn't currently mapped. It's in the city's UDO, but it's not applied to any property in the city. It's designed to work along with the base district. It takes a very light touch into what it actually does. It generally restricts a handful of transit inappropriate uses rather than incentivizing or even necessarily allowing desired uses. It doesn't permit increased development height or density. It doesn't directly address affordability, which is a key question, obviously, across the city, and certainly one that came out very clearly in the equitable development process. So a couple of images to the right kind of summarize what it does. It's designed to discourage the typical post-war auto-oriented development, but does not at all guarantee any kind of affordable development or even necessarily a very walkable form of development. It does limit or prohibit a handful of uses, auto-oriented uses like drive-throughs, car wash, cemetery. It's not a very long list of uses. It addresses height and frontage, how the buildings meet the street in a limited way. It simply prohibits the most suburban frontages, but it doesn't necessarily require a more walkable or what we call an urban frontage in the UDO. Prohibits one-story buildings, but doesn't require anything more than that. It does address parking. It reduces the required amounts of parking, similar to in the downtown mixed-use district. And I would note there's a text change, actually, that will be before you this evening that would address that in a partial way, eliminating residential requirements. Of course, parking can still be provided, but eliminating that requirement in TOD. So I've mentioned the equitable development study a few times, and that's something, the final report we anticipate publishing this month, have a lot of information about the process, what we heard, and key recommendations that involve this topic, zoning for transit, affordable transit-oriented development, and also a number of other provisions that address how to maximize that transit investment. But some of the key results that go right to this question involve survey information that we heard from several hundred respondents during the process, and just a clear message that affordability near BRT is just essential. And we raised some trade-off questions because it's often easy to support something in the abstract without necessarily wrestling with the implications and what it means if we are to accomplish that. So we explicitly asked, would people support taller buildings if that means that more affordable housing can be provided, and still strong support for that. And again, a very, very strong level of support for allowing a broader range of housing types in the residential areas near BRT stations outside that core mixed-use station area, but still within walking distance. So again, a very strongly supported option. So the Equitable Development Plan has come up with some pretty specific recommendations for enhancing, for overhauling that overlay district, and that's what's before you today, potentially, to directly address affordability in a way that it doesn't at all right now. So providing a height bonus for projects that include affordable units in areas, again, walking distance, but outside the core, allowing a broader range of housing types. Also directly addressing pedestrian safety and comfort in a way that it doesn't do now. So requiring essentially an urban frontage, a frontage that puts buildings closer to the street, prohibits parking between the building and the street, requires wider sidewalks, and generally provides a much higher level of pedestrian amenity. So a few specifics, and these are a starting point for if a text change is authorized today or following the presentation of the Equitable Development Report. Starting point for that text change, which we would anticipate would receive a lot of discussion as it goes through the process with Planning Commission and Council. But the study did provide some pretty clear recommendations, including that height bonus that I mentioned for affordability. So 1/3 of units in the bonus floors affordable, and we did some feasibility analysis to make sure that these numbers were realistic. Affordable at 50% of AMI for 30 years. And so examples of how that 50% could work are, and most of the properties on these corridors outside of downtown are currently zoned for 3 stories. So that translates into 2 additional stories if that overlay is applied. For 5-story zoning, that would relate to 8 stories, 12 stories, 18 stories, and so on. And in the event of a rezoning, then conditions would be, to make this work, would be expected to provide an equivalent number of affordable units. Also, the concept of an employment bonus for projects that may want to provide simply office or retail or a mix of those uses. Obviously, employment along transit corridors is very important as well in terms of providing access to jobs. So a smaller increase for non-residential projects so that they could access some kind of additional height as well. I talked about pedestrian safety, again, just requiring that they meet the standards of an urban frontage. So you get a much safer and comfortable environment for people walking, whether they're accessing transit or simply walking to a destination. A few other provisions, again, eliminating requirements for vehicular parking. That would be partially done through the text change today, but this would also address commercial parking requirements. Also, exploring a requirement that any structured parking have flat floors, which is something we've seen in a growing number of cities. The thought process being that as those parking facilities may see decreased demand in the future or increased demand for other uses, they can more easily be converted to office or residential uses if the floors are flat. Requiring secured indoor bicycle parking, and looking at outdoor amenity areas and incentivizing them to be more public facing, a more public plaza rather than just an internally facing amenity area. And a few more things, prohibiting some additional uses. Fuel sales is not in the current overlay, nor is self-storage. Looking at requiring transit amenities for properties near BRT stations, and if applied to a residential district, allowing at least R10 level of residential development. So the last element of this, that would be revising the existing transit overlay district, which is designed to go, if you're looking at the map here, in those more mixed-use areas right along the corridor. But that still leaves a number of properties that are still within easy walking distance of the station, but are zoned residentially. And so the recommendation is to create a new overlay, a TOD-R or TOD residential overlay, designed to be applied to those areas and aimed at improving housing supply and housing affordability through a couple of key measures. One would be allowing duplex, triplex, fourplex units at the same standards as a detached house. And that's something the City Council has expressed interest in on a citywide basis. So that may be addressed through a citywide process. However, it could be that a more targeted approach is where that process arrives, and this would be an option for achieving that. Also, including maximum unit sizes as a more direct means of addressing affordability and displacement. Many of these neighborhoods, as we've heard through this process, and I'm sure you have heard as well, are experiencing a number of tear down of older homes and replacement with much larger new houses. And creating a maximum would remove some of that incentive while allowing, again, a broader range of types of units would allow for smaller, more affordable units. So there's three basic options, and this is what City Manager noted we're looking for some direction on. Again, given the difficulty in the current moment of having that large-scale rezoning, the staff recommendation is to revise the overlay first before applying. And both of these steps are, we believe, necessary. It's more of a question of the best order in which to do them. So applying it now would mean going back later after it's applied and then rewriting it after it's gone through that approval process. While we believe that revising it now allows for discussion about that before it's applied to property, so a clearer concept when it is applied of what people are actually getting. So the recommended option, I mentioned the equitable development report being available later this month, and then looking at presenting that to council after the break. So accepting that report, potentially adopting that report, and then at that point, authorizing the text change. So that's a slower process to get to mapping, but does provide more certainty. Another option, if council does want to take more of an in-between approach and move a little faster, would be to authorize the text change now. That's not unreasonable given that the equitable development study was pretty clear on these recommendations and that they did receive some strong support. So I believe that that's also an option that can be chosen. And then the last option would be to go ahead and apply the overlay to those sections before. And if that's the direction, then staff would come back with some very specific approach to how to manage that during a remote meeting phase. So a lot of information, and I'm happy to take questions about any of that information.
I have a number of questions, but I see some hands raised. So Councilor Melton was first, then Councilor Cox.
Yes, I'll be brief. I think this is fantastic. This is exactly what we need to be doing around our transit. We need to make sure that we're building dense, walkable, mixed-use, affordable developments. And so I fully support moving this forward. I would support the staff recommendation, which is option one. I just also want to highlight another piece because you included it in here and it got me very excited about the triplex and fourplexes being allowed in the same dimensional standards as a detached house. I absolutely think that should be included in the transportation overlay district. I also think we need to bring attention to moving that initiative forward citywide again. It's something I brought up when we were discussing missing middle housing months ago. So I would be interested in working through a public process or a text change to allow that. And to the extent we don't need to be duplicating work, if it's going to come up in this process, maybe we can keep it in this process and also sort of duplicate it outside. And that's all I have.
Councilor Cox?
Yes, I wanted to say that I think this is excellent too. However, I have one concern, and that is, what are the provisions for 30% AMI or less housing? I don't see any targets for 30% or less AMI housing. And those are really the folks in this city that are really in need of housing. So are there any provisions in these proposals for 30% or less AMI housing?
So I mentioned that there was some research done during the equitable development process on the feasibility of that kind of recommendation. And generally what they found was that targeting 30% of AMI would tend to be a pretty significant barrier to projects and make it less likely that they would choose to use that bonus option, and more likely that they would go forward with development purely market rate housing. So there's a balance in the depth of affordability and duration of affordability, and how many units can actually be achieved. So the consultants on this project found that 50% was somewhat aggressive, but would be, in the current market conditions, something that would be utilized. Another recommendation of the study is, because these kind of bonus programs have had, frankly, mixed success, we believe it would be successful here, but they do involve some uncertainties about would they be used or not. If they're used very, very frequently, then maybe the target has been undershot and we can look for deeper or longer affordability. If they're not used at all, then it's not been calibrated perfectly. So one of the recommendations is to monitor the use very closely and very deliberately go back and recalibrate as needed to maximize the benefits of the district. So we think that 50% is the right target, or that's what the study found. But that's something that in the future, there certainly can be some analysis about.
Well, I disagree with it. I think we need that target now. I think you need that target now.
Excuse me.
Well, I thought I had the floor.
Mr. Hall, no, Mr. Hall had his hand raised to make an explanation. Can we please let him speak?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The only piece I wanted to add to Jason's explanation was that there are also a lot of other broader affordable housing concepts and ideas that the council is currently considering that could tie together with these things. So, for example, in your affordable housing bond referendum, you have a provision associated with land development. You could target a transit area and then produce 30% units or below using a city project public-private partnership as opposed to the density bonus provision. I think what Jason's trying to describe is more what has been the experience in other cities with offering a bonus program, and then the private market won't choose that option. But that doesn't mean that your transit policy couldn't use some other tools.
Excuse me, we're having a problem with this system. Losing faces, and also had trouble hearing.
I'm sorry. So, Mayor, let's do a sound check. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I didn't see that on our end, and I'm seeing some faces from others. Did anybody else experience the same thing the mayor just experienced?
No.
No, that happens to me when my Wi-Fi is going out, and it may be just a connection issue. But
Are you good? Are you good now, Mayor, or is it still?
Yeah, I keep losing everybody's visual. And then, Ruffin, I lost the audio on the latter part of what you were saying.
Okay. So maybe let's try that again. So Mayor, can everybody hear me okay right now? Yes?
Yes.
Mayor? Yes.
And I see everybody's visual again.
Okay. Okay, so I'm not sure where you lost me, so I'll try that again. So just if we look more broadly for just a second at your affordable housing toolkit or affordable housing options that you have in front of you, what this particular overlay is talking about is around the concept just of the density bonus. And what Jason's describing is that in some of these other cities, those density bonus programs, while offered, were not used because the private sector didn't buy into them. It didn't work for whatever reason. And so since it's a voluntary program, if they don't participate, then you don't get the income targeting units that you like. However, the council has some other options, for example, within your affordable housing bond referendum proposal of either land purchase and development or public-private partnerships, P3s, where you could provide a greater subsidy from the city into a project and connect that to some of the transit-oriented development. So in other words, you can achieve those goals through multiple different methods or tools. I think there's no provision. If the council wanted to do AMI targeting lower than 50% for the overlay, you certainly could. I think what we're seeing across the country is that normally the private market won't support that without a subsidy. So it's really about the arithmetic of projects. You have some other choices as well.
Councillor Cox.
I appreciate that. But, you know, I've been on council for almost 6 years and I hear this same song and dance every year. And we ultimately never have a provision that incentivizes or encourages development for those earning less than 30% AMI. We continue to not put anything out there. We get a self-fulfilling promise, which is we never actually help the people that are most in need in the city for affordable housing. I would support that we tie some bonuses to 30% AMI or less.
Madam Mayor, I think Jason
Branch, and then Councillor Stewart.
I think Jason had his hand up. I think he wanted to comment on something.
Yes, just quickly 2 points. One being that when we do present the full equitable development study, it absolutely does have recommendations that go to deeper affordability, including site acquisition of properties along the corridor that would give the city much more leverage to directly provide that deeper affordability, as well as some new revenue generating concepts for that same purpose. So that is absolutely a part of what's envisioned by the equitable development study. So we've been specifically talking just about one of the tools that uses more market forces to achieve affordability. But that said, one option would be to provide a few different options for achieving that bonus. One could be at a deeper level of affordability, probably would involve some trade-offs with duration, and then provide more of a menu for achieving that bonus. What we've heard, though, is that it's less likely that that deeper affordability would be something included in market rate development.
That's because the voices you're listening to are development voices, and you're not listening to the voices of the community.
So,
speak, please. Council Branch.
First of all, I want to thank the staff for this information. I know this is something that we have talked about in the Transit and Transportation Committee for a while, and we've delayed some action and recommendations on our overlays to receive this information. I know another councilor had their hand up, but at the appropriate time, and also understanding Councilor Cox's concerns and questions, we do need to look at ways to incentivize and help support 30% of AMI and below. I think it's going to be a multifaceted approach. And this is one tool in the toolbox that we have to continue to work for. We've done some things already, even with some of our 9%, we've pushed and we've made it very clear that we want to target 30%. We're starting to see that increase. There's more that needs to be done as we continue to work. Again, this is one tool in the toolbox to look at all of our transit areas to increase transportation and affordable housing along the corridor. So at the appropriate time, I was going to let Councilman Stewart speak, and then I would like to make a motion to move forward, but in moving forward, also send this to the Transit and Transportation Committee for review.
Which option are you looking at moving forward?
Option one.
Option one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Stewart?
Thank you. I want to echo some of the comments that have been made about how excited I am about where this project is and how much work has gone into it. And I just want to highlight I thought I was looking at it, the focus on thinking about smaller units, and specifically, I'm assuming this is getting to gentrification, and making sure that we are thinking about that community as well, and especially around our BRT. So anything, any other, I'd just encourage additional thinking around that as we continue to move forward. I'd love to see that in here. Thank you.
Counselor Knight?
Yeah, just real quick, did the staff have a recommendation as to which one of the options? I maybe have missed that. And then, okay, let them answer that. Then go ahead. As to which option?
Yes. Staff does recommend the first option, which involves council receiving the equitable development report, which again, we anticipate publishing this month and delivering to council after the break, so that there's the benefit of having that broader context of all the recommendations of the report, including some that go to deeper affordability. And then at that point, authorizing the text change. That's the more kind of traditional process is, since we've been studying this area, provide that report, provide that study and the recommendations, and then at that point, authorize the regulatory change.
Okay, thank you for that. And that would not be a much slower process than option 2 then?
No, not much slower. After the break, there would be some planning commission review of the report and then back to council. So it would add a few months to it. So that's why we provided that second option of authorizing the text change now.
Okay. Council, if y'all think you should go option 1, that's fine. I wouldn't mind to go option 2, but if y'all think option 1 is the best way to go, I'll support that.
Okay, I have a couple of questions if everybody else is done. Okay. First off, with density bonuses, one of the things that we talked about when this originally came up is that density bonuses rarely work, even with 50% AMI. If you look at Durham as one of the examples, they've offered a triple density bonus for several years now. I don't think anything has ever been built under that. Based on what I have heard from different groups, is this doesn't work unless there's other incentives built into it, such as just a couple of examples, a express review process, or a reduction in fees for affordable units that are built. Have you given any consideration as to other incentives, and have you talked to the development community on what might encourage them to actually build, as opposed to just coming up with this potential bonus option?
Yes. So we did reach out to the development community. That was part of that feasibility analysis. And there are some additional, incentives to achieving that. So reduction of parking is a pretty significant one. That's a major cost in a development. So the ability to not have that cost, and at the same time for there to still be a public benefit to that because there's transit service and walkability nearby, makes a lot of sense. So we did hear, of course, the proof is once it's out there and to see whether it's taken advantage of or not, but we did hear that what's proposed would be desirable and something that would be used by the development community. Now, that said, through the revision process, the text change revision process, that's the opportunity for a little bit more specific conversation. So if there are some additional considerations that come up through that, then that's the opportunity for them to be focused on more specifically than we did during this process.
Okay. Second question, you talked about maximum unit sizes. What does minimum lot sizes, what role does that play in this? Because that's part of the issue too. You have a minimum lot size, you're basically requiring the construction of a larger home. So have you looked at both of those and how that plays into it?
So talking, I think now more about the idea of the TODR overlay and some options for different housing types and possibly looking at unit sizes. So that looked more closely not at lot sizes because simply the lot sizes tend to have more of a relationship to the overall development pattern. Through an overlay, I think that is a more significant change than typically you would see from an overlay district. I think that is more of a question of the base zoning and is that appropriate or not, the lot size. So an approach for that, and one that would be looked at in the next coming years, would be through a station area planning process. That involves going back, and I mentioned that the overlays always work in conjunction with the base zoning. So I think there's only so much that you reasonably want to change through an overlay. If it's more than that, then I think it's a look at the base zoning that's required. So that station area planning process gives us the opportunity to say, are these base zones appropriate? Should more areas that are residential be mixed use owned, or vice versa? Should the residential zoning categories be looked at? That would provide that opportunity, because it would be a bigger change, to do that on a smaller scale with more public involvement on that scale.
Okay, and my third question has to do with family-oriented housing. You know, a lot of what you see, you know, the renderings look really nice, but they're really focused more on 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Have you really looked at the whole issue of family-oriented housing and how that might fit into this effort?
We did not specifically look at the size or the number of bedrooms of units. Typically, household size has been dropping, but that's certainly a reasonable consideration to make sure that there's units that work for households of various sizes. But that's not something that we specifically looked at.
There's some really good information from ULI that just came out on this. So, you know, I think that the focus has been on individuals or, you know, 2-person, you know, 1 or 2 person families or housing, when one of the challenges really is housing our families, and that new zoning area that you're looking at around the stations might be a good way to achieve that. So I would just encourage some more I guess, research in that regard. Okay, thank you. I know a lot of hard work has gone into this and very much appreciated. Thank you. If there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go back to Councilor Branch and ask him to make his motion.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I move that we allow the equitability development around transit to proceed to process to conclude, and that a report which will include recommendations for revising the overlay expected in July. Following adoption, council can authorize a text change to revise the overlay. Applying the overlay zoning district to the corridors would follow. That's option 1 as presented in our background information that I move forward.
Okay. And Councilor Stewart has seconded that. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that was a 6-1 vote with Councilor Cox opposed. Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Also, one thing I want to state is that when this does come back to us in our August meeting, we still have the overlay within the Transit and Transportation Committee. So I'll probably be looking after the council receives this report to move this to that committee so that we can recommend out an overall proposal from the committee going forward.
That would make sense. Okay, thank you. All right, next, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Your last item today for the report of the manager is some updates with regards to some work we're doing with downtown Raleigh, the Downtown Raleigh Alliance, our downtown business owners, and offering a proposal to provide some additional assistance given recent events of May and June. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Green in the manager's office, and I believe Bill King with DRA is here as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council, and I'm Jim Green, Assistant City Manager, and I know that you're all fully aware of the property damage that occurred in downtown Raleigh the last weekend in May during the civil unrest. DRA reports over 170 buildings receiving property damage ranging from broken out windows and doors to spray painting to some with fire and water damage. Since the last week in May, city staff has worked and continues to work with DRA and downtown stakeholders to help with the recovery, everything from cleanup to expedited permitting process to help with repair for the buildings. So a lot of work has gone on, but obviously still need for recovery in the downtown. Bill King, President and CEO with DRA, has really been active and worked closely with city staff. He has spent a lot of time in virtual meetings with downtown stakeholders and even did surveys to ask the stakeholders about the recovery and what the priorities are. Out of that information, in the city staff working with Bill, we really focused on two critical priorities for the downtown and are recommending today some financial assistance to help DRA with those priorities. The first is to develop a strategic marketing plan. Obviously, things have changed in the downtown over the past several months, and Bill heard loud and clear from stakeholders of the need to market the downtown, look for opportunities to get visitors, market downtown as safe and active, and some work needs to go into this. So that's one priority area where we feel that the city can help. Another priority area that Bill heard from downtown was the ambassador program. Currently, DRA employs 12 ambassadors. They focus on downtown security, augment public safety services. They focus on customer service and on meeting and greeting and communication with downtown stakeholders and visitors. A request and a priority to expand that program and the need to see how more ambassadors could be included in downtown. So city staff has reviewed budgets, and I'd like to thank Veronica Creech and the economic development team for identifying $300,000 in the budget of the Office of Economic Development, specifically in the building upfit grant line item. Currently, we have about $1.5 million in that account. The recommendation is to repurpose $300,000 of that and enter into an agreement for a one-time allocation to the DRA, where that money could then be used to focus on those two key priority areas: developing a strategic marketing plan and expanding the ambassador program. Bill believes that with that money, he can not only work to develop those two priorities, but also it would give him the opportunity of some flexibility within his budget to look at some additional things. We see this as an opportunity for the whole downtown. We fully understand that there are some property owners and some businesses that have some damage and need for repair and replacement, but these recommended priorities, hearing from the stakeholders, working with DRA, and again, staff's feeling that this can help the whole downtown. We wanted to be here today and recommend that. Again, this would be a one-time allocation. With that, let me invite Bill King to come up and talk a little about the status of the downtown, but also about these two priorities.
Okay, thank you all so much. I am Bill King with the Downtown Raleigh Alliance. Thank you for giving me just a few minutes to speak on downtown and this matter. Obviously downtown has been affected deeply by two unprecedented crises. The COVID crisis, which has been ongoing since March, has been compounded by vandalism that took place at the end of May. We have quite a bit of data that measures economic impact in downtown, and most of that data indicates economic activity down approximately 80% in downtown. So it's sales data, pedestrian traffic, things like that. Obviously, as Jim mentioned, we estimate over 170 buildings did suffer damage during that vandalism. And downtown's business is unique because they do rely on a lot of foot traffic. And so our offices are still slow to come back as we deal with the COVID crisis. And so we're going through a challenging time in downtown. Obviously, I'd like to thank the city for all the work they've done over the last few weeks and months to help us pivot during this period. We've worked really hard as an organization to make sure that we have up-to-date website and all the stores and restaurants and their various services that are open. We've done a We Are DTR video campaign featuring many of our entrepreneurs. We've worked closely with the city of Raleigh on expansion of outdoor dining and curbside parking zones, which has been a tremendous lifeline to our businesses. And we've also pivoted our farmers market to be in line with public health regulations, so pre-ordering, things like that. And we've worked closely with regards to making sure that patrons throughout downtown are following public health regulations when they come and support our businesses. But obviously the needs are significant, and there's a lot of need out there in downtown. We did conduct a survey that we closed last week with over 1,100 responses from downtown stakeholders. So that's residents, businesses, property owners, employees, and visitors, and people just interested. The needs were deep. Marketing, security were cited as two of the top needs for those businesses. So when I talk about marketing, I really see a couple of things going on there. In the near term, it's reminding people that the businesses are open. Each day we do have more businesses reopening, taking down the plyboards, and are available. And ways to support those businesses while being consistent with appropriate public health regulations. In the long term, we want to remind people that downtown is not only open, but continues to be unique, such as a place where 93% of our retailers are locally owned. We're the largest collection of small, locally owned businesses in the city. And so we want to remind people that part of supporting what makes Raleigh is supporting entrepreneurs like that. So we see a lot opportunity there in our marketing. We also want to remind people that there's a lot of available parking down here, a lot of available access. I think downtown is more accessible than folks realize, and it's safer than people realize. Security is the second component of that. That would be an expansion of the ambassador program. I do want to note that we already have one planned expansion that we've secured resources for social services ambassador. So we have secured resources for that. So that would be an ambassador trained as a social service worker to work with those in need on the streets to connect them with services. So that's connecting them with homeless services, food services, things like that, to make sure that they are actually getting connected with resources. So we are moving forward with that. This would be resource to hire several more safety ambassadors. So those are specifically eyes on the street. So they provide not only guidance and directions, but they provide safe escorts back and forth from your vehicle. And then they are just walking around downtown, making sure everything's going okay. They are able to see if an incident is happening. They can make a phone call to the police if necessary. They can diffuse the situation if possible. These particular ambassadors would be what we call fixed route ambassadors. So what that means is we would deploy them specifically in hot spots, so areas where we're seeing a lot of activity, so that they become a more constant presence there, which I think is a need. Finally, as Jim mentioned, these funds would allow us to redeploy some of our own funds, so DRA privately fundraises as well. The third area of need for downtown is really adaptation. So that's things that downtown needs in order to be able to survive this moment, particularly with the impacts of these two crises. And so that could be everything from repair to some of the pivot activities you need to be able to survive. Think about that as expanded outdoor dining or additional types of equipment, or even pivoting your business model. There's a lot of need there. So we're exploring ways to deploy our privately earned funds to help with that. And so these resources would also be helpful in addressing that. So we see marketing, security, and adaptation as the strategy in the near term for helping downtown recover. I do want to take this moment finally to not only thank the city, but also put out a call to action to our community, our downtown will need you. This is a downtown of unique and diverse business owners. There's a lot of work to be done to bring this downtown back. I do want to note that we are putting a lot more resources as well into our existing work for diverse business owners and minority and women-owned business owners. We've already significantly pivoted more resources into that, but there's a lot of work to bring all of downtown back. And the support we got that Sunday morning after the first night of vandalism, where the entire community showed up, is the type of support we're going to need to bring this downtown back. We have challenges with doing so. Right now, we have to follow appropriate public health regulations, but we're going to need this community to help bring this downtown back because it's at the heart of Raleigh, and a vibrant downtown is part of a successful Raleigh. So I thank you all for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Bill, don't disappear, please. I just want to commend you for the hard work that you have done. When COVID hit, you worked with our Economic Development Office. You worked with us to help set up the Small Business Relief Fund. You have been an incredible partner. And I just want to thank you and recognize the work that the DRA has done, and also done selflessly without, how can I put this? It's not about territory, it's about the good of the community. And we've really seen that come out in these past, say, 3 months. I also want to thank you for setting up meetings, virtual meetings with myself and members of the business community. And business alliances. I think we've had 4 or 5 of those now. It's been a good opportunity to hear what people have to say. There was a couple of things I wanted to add. The items you mentioned clearly are on the top of the list, but some other things were facade grants. There were a couple people also mentioned community policing, that they would, they miss seeing their beat officer or somebody they knew by name that they trusted. And another thing that was mentioned was a potential alert system that would allow police to alert business owners if something is occurring that they need to know about downtown. I know you were going to investigate Durham's system. So I think it would be helpful if you could share that information. And the fourth thing that I noted that we heard quite a bit about was the vulnerability of our homeless community. I think that this has been a lot more, people can see it now. Maybe they couldn't see it before, but our homeless community has been very vulnerable during COVID. Also, after the violence that occurred. So I commend you for putting a social services worker out on the streets to help in this regard. One thing I would like to do, I think what we're going to do today with the $300,000 is a great first step, but I would like the city manager to come back to us at our meeting in August and potentially look at some of these areas, such as facade grants, community policing, the alert system, but probably most importantly, updating us. I know the chief is working on a plan for how we could create a mental health unit and a homeless unit that would help us, help our communities and those most vulnerable. I would like a report and an update on that, because I know that work has just started. I know that she has looked at the Portland model, which is something that I saw at the U.S. Conference of Mayors that was really impressive. And I know there's other models out there, but I would like to get an update on that. And I think these are some things that we need to be treating as a #1 priority. Our downtown, we spent years building our downtown, and we've got to spend some time focused on rebuilding it. So if anybody has any other questions of Bill, Councillor Cox?
Yeah, I agree. We need to rebuild downtown, but I'm not sure that $300,000 for a marketing and communications plan and a few additional ambassadors is really appropriate. I don't think it's equitable. There are a lot of businesses throughout the city, not just downtown, that are suffering and have been suffering for months because of COVID-19. And I really think that the $300,000 would be better left in the building upfit grant fund, because certainly businesses can use that money in order to perhaps even execute some of the repairs that are needed. I mean, the last time I voted for a marketing and communications plan, we spent $250,000 on a new logo, and I don't think that was a very good use of money. And so I'm not inclined to support this proposal.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I've looked at this, and one thing that I see out of this is really the ambassadors. One thing that, you know, people talk about is public safety, and the ambassadors are around a lot downtown. You see them; they're interacting. They help people. They assist people, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that goes back where you said businesses don't know their beat officers, because you probably see the ambassadors serving in that role. Which is something that's interesting, because it's something that we keep hearing people push for, is for ways that they can interact with someone that can assist them that may not be law enforcement. And it helps us utilize our resources. So for that reason, I'm definitely going to work and support this, and I'll move for approval.
Do we have a second? Councilor Stewart? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So that was a 6-1 vote, clerk. And then is everyone okay with my request for the city manager to bring back a report on some of these additional things we might be able to do, but most importantly, the mental health and homeless unit, what progress we have made on that? Question, Councilor Melton?
No, I just want to say that I look forward to receiving that report, and I would be remiss if I did not bring up again the fact that I would really like to see us focusing on adding civilian mental health and social workers who would be tasked with providing care and support to our most vulnerable residents, so those experiencing mental health issues and homeless issues. I think that is the direction we should be moving, and I look forward to receiving a report on the work that has been made in that direction so far. Thank you.
I think that, Councilor Melton, we made that very clear to the chief the last time we had this conversation. So I will look forward to that as well. Okay. Mr. City Manager, do you have anything? Oh, we approved that. We'll be getting the report back. Do you have any?
That's it, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the Raleigh Transit Authority.
Madam Mayor, I think we lost the podium. I was wondering if our city managers, anything staff wants to say. I know we received some information in our backup material. Is that?
No, Mayor and Council, this is a resolution that was adopted by the Raleigh Transit Authority for the council's consideration, and the staff is simply available to answer any questions.
All right. Madam Mayor, I take it that if I may, that we receive this information, but also I ask that it is passed on to our emergency services to see if there's anything that needs to be considered or changed. But also I will ask that I think many years ago, there was conversation about our transit authority possibly being separate from the city. And I just want to make sure that the council and the city staff and the citizens all understand different roles and responsibilities, and just ask if staff can review those procedures and come back with a report to the city council. And then we can go from there if we need to make some updates. As we found, even at our last meeting, we had a water bill, stormwater bill change that goes back to 1986. So there may be some things here we may want to modify.
Okay, thank you. Do we need a formal motion on that?
I think Gail is shaking her head no, that we don't.
City Attorney?
My understanding is that you're just going to ask staff for a report, and then this particular matter is going to committee?
Yeah. Is information.
Yeah, seeking information, and then just compare this to other transit authorities and see if we're still in line and in sync with what we're doing.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay, I see head nodding. Oh, and thumbs up. So, okay. Thank you, Councilor Branch. Our next is report and recommendation of the Economic Development and Innovation Committee. You did meet,
We had our first meeting of the council term. We discussed the two pieces of the strategic plan that were assigned to our committee. We gave staff some direction, and they are going to come back with some more updates. There will not be a meeting in July. Moving forward, our next meeting will be in August. There are 3 items pending, the strategic plan, and then 2 other items that are coordinating with our community partners and our local partners. I'd like for those last 2 pieces to be more of a roundtable discussion, which is better facilitated in person. So I think we're going to have to look at where we're at with in-person meetings and what the health guidelines say. If it looks like we're not going to be able to accomplish an in-person meeting anytime in the near future, then I may get with staff and come up with a plan for how we could do a roundtable virtually. But that's where we're at. No July meeting, and nothing to report. Out.
Okay, thank you. The next item was the report and recommendation of the Growth and Natural Resources Committee. Councilor Stewart.
So we met on June 23rd and discussed 2 items. The first item was related to text change recommendations from city staff that were informed by a consultant study of code opportunities to improve development on hillsides or slope sites. The committee recommends that the city council authorize the development of a text change that would provide greater flexibility in the measurement of height, limit retaining walls and urban frontages, allow for more flexibility in uses of half stories, clarify transition expectations, and improve pedestrian access on corner sites and where sites require retaining walls and in parking limited frontage. Our recommendation was supported by 3 members. Councilmember Cox indicated a desire for additional study before supporting the text change. So we are recommending that we move forward, that we authorize this text change. So I'm just asking council to uphold this recommendation.
So is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Do we have a second? Councilor Melton has seconded this. Okay, all in favor? Oh, Councilor Cox. Councilor Cox, you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
My apologies. I just want to make a comment as to why I think we need additional study is that during our Growth and Natural Resources Committee meeting, we really haven't heard from the public about this issue. And I really think it's important that before we authorize the text change that we explore these things in more detail and get more citizen engagement. And really, at this point, we really haven't had any. And I really think we should have kept it in committee and gotten that citizen engagement. Thank you.
If I may respond, this item came up twice during Growth and Natural Resources. Both times public comment was available. No one signed up to speak at all. And now we will be moving forward into the text change process, which will have additional touch points for public input. So again, the committee recommended we move forward, noting that we'd heard it twice and hadn't heard it from anybody. So let's move forward through the process.
Okay, Councilor Melton.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is a code change, right? Rob.
It's a text.
Text change.
It's authorizing a text change.
But is it a UDO change?
Yes.
There's going to be public comment at Planning Commission, and it's going to come back to council for public comment before a vote. So there's going to be 2 more opportunities for public comment.
Correct.
Okay, just want to be sure. All right, thank you. I called a question.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? So clerk, that's a 6-1 vote in favor with Councilor Cox opposed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then we had one other item. So similar to the other committees, our second item was a discussion of the GNR key focus of the strategic plan. We affirmed prior work from our retreat and gave additional direction to staff. Staff will work to draft potential strategic plan modifications for the committee's consideration late this summer. And our next regularly scheduled meeting will be held on August 25th. And that is all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is the report and recommendation of the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Committee. We discussed the equality NC recommendations, and the committee recommends reporting this item out with a request that the city attorney bring back to the full council a report on state statutes regarding LGBT anti-discrimination for potential inclusion in the city's legislative agenda. So that is a motion. Do I have a second? Councilor Cox has seconded that. All in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next meeting, we will be holding a next meeting if in August, and that would be the 25th as well. We would hope to be able to do that at 11:30. Okay. All right. Next, we have the report and the recommendation of the Transportation and Transit Committee.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. The first item that I have that we reported out, there's actually 2 motions that needs to be made. We've had micromobility in our committee actually pre-COVID, and we've had some meetings and received some feedback from providers as well as from the community at some of those meetings. The first motion involves our current contract that we have, our current encroachment agreement. Right, it is to expire within August, and we are in the process of creating a new master encroachment. So the first motion is that the City Council authorize staff to execute an extension of the current master encroachment agreement with Gotcha for a period up to 6 months, or until a new service provider or providers are chosen and a new master encroachment agreement is executed.
Councilor Melton? Oh, you're second.
That was a motion, I seconded it.
Okay, I could see the lips, but not hear you. Okay, great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right, and the second motion is that as previously approved, the delegation to the city manager to approve a number of encroachment administratively, which excluded mass encroachment agreements for micromobilities. We recommend that we direct the city attorney office to prepare language that would delegate execution of a master encroachment agreement for a micromobility service.
Okay, do we have a second? Councilor Melton, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously.
So as they start working on that in that language, we will definitely move forward and consider that there's still more that needs to be done to approve the agreement and the RFP when they go out. So we'll come before council. We still had 2 other items that are still remain within our committee. One involves transit overlay districts, looking at residentials, the TODR. We look to have a conversation on that at our August meeting. But Councilor Milton, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think wasn't there one more motion related to micromobility about defining a stand-up scooter?
No, I didn't have that in any of my notes.
It's on the agenda item. It's above the two that you read.
All right, let me go back. Authorize staff to draft the change. Oh, the definition of electric scooter. Okay, I apologize. I was going through everything else. That motion is to recommend that the city that motion is to recommend that the council authorize staff to draft a text change to change our definition of the term electric stand-up scooter for review and for approval. Basically, currently within the state, there is no policy for electric scooters. They're considered mopeds. So this is giving us the ability to pull out electric scooters so that as we move forward and making changes, we have a clear definition of what electric scooter is. So that is the motion for the draft text change.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second by Councilor Melton. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Melton. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is we still have strategic plan review for transportation in key focus areas within our committee. We gave staff direction that they will bring back to us at our next committee meeting, which will be actually August the 27th at 3 p.m.
Okay.
And we will know on the 18th if that meeting will be virtual or not.
Okay. City Manager?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Councilmember Branch, for raising that point. What I would suggest at this point, I forgot about your committees, is I would just make the assumption that the committee meetings are going to be virtual the last week of August, and then we will just all plan for that. And if you want to change that approach for September, you'll do it forward. But we'll prep to the meetings, the committee meetings as virtual for August as well. I didn't mention that earlier, just for planning purposes. I know we had some technical issues last time, but hopefully we'll figure that out this time. So again, that's your choice, but I would suggest we plan for it that way and then maybe reconsider for September meetings.
Okay. We'll go ahead and plan mine to be virtual since it's only 1 week after our 18th meeting.
Right.
So that makes it easier for planning purposes. So it will be virtual at 3 p.m. on August 27th.
Okay.
That is all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Melton, do you have a question?
No, I never actually announced the EDI meeting in August. It'll be Tuesday, August 25th at 1:30, and it'll be virtual. I just wanted to make sure I said that on the record during the meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have the report from the mayor and city council. Councilor Melton, starting with you.
Yes, thank you. 2 weeks ago at our last meeting, we appointed 9 individuals to our police advisory board and 2 alternates. The police advisory board is limited in its current authority. It certainly falls short of what some members of the community have asked for, and it falls short of what I campaigned on. Currently, our police advisory board is responsible with reviewing the existing RPD procedures, contributing to fair policy development, and engaging community members through education outreach on Raleigh Police Department directives. The board does not conduct investigations, hear testimony, or contribute to disciplinary action. The board will not respond to citizen complaints, and the board will not collect data. There is a reason why the authority of the board is limited right now, and it has to deal with existing state law. So I'd like to ask the city attorney to just do a quick run overview of why we are not able to give more authority and oversight to the board at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to do that. I'll give you a broad overview, and if anybody has any more questions, they can feel free to ask. I know there's been a lot of requests of the council to create a board with a lot of adjudicatory powers, if you will. In North Carolina, the relationship between the General Assembly and the city is one that is not necessarily the same as other states. Basically, the courts have universally held, including the Supreme Court of North Carolina, that municipalities are creatures of the General Assembly and that they have no inherent powers. So everything that we as a city are allowed to do is because the General Assembly has delegated that power to the city. The North Carolina Constitution also sets this up and says that the General Assembly has the power to give cities whatever duties and powers that it desires and that it deems advisable, and that's where we are. So right now, the way that the general statutes are written and any local acts or charter that we may have do not include the powers to create a board with the authority requested. To do that, the General Assembly would have to grant that authority, and that could be done potentially by a local act unique to Raleigh, or it could be done by a general act that gave that power to every municipality in North Carolina. The process for that would be to make a request through our lobbyist and our office to the Wake County delegation to get that in the queue as part of a legislative agenda in 2021, which is really when that's the first opportunity that would come up. So if you have any other questions, I'm glad to ask, but that's where we are on that particular matter at this time.
Thank you. I think we have a unique opportunity in this moment because our state government has all indicated initiatives to be looking at this issue and to be looking at issues of social justice. To that end, I have written a letter that I propose that we send to all three branches of our state government, indicating our support for more transparency, oversight, and power to our community and our police advisory board. So I'm going to read it now. It's addressed to the Honorable Roy Cooper, the Honorable Phil E. Berger, the Honorable Tim Moore, and the Honorable Sherry Beasley. It's regarding criminal justice reform and local authority. It says, Dear Governor Cooper, Senator Berger, Speaker Moore, and Chief Justice Beasley, the City of Raleigh supports the recent initiatives announced by all branches of our state government to address criminal justice reform, including the bipartisan Legislative Task Force on Justice, Law Enforcement, and Community Relations announced by Speaker Tim Moore, Governor Cooper's North Carolina Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice, and Chief Justice Beasley's commitment to examining the way our courts administer justice. We look forward to working with you. The City of Raleigh recognizes that transparency and accountability are needed to engender positive relationships between our community and the police. The City of Raleigh supports and would welcome authority to provide more transparency, oversight, and power to our community. I propose that we send this letter to the branches of our state government, indicating our support and additional oversight, our willingness to work with them on this issue. And to the extent that we are not able to make progress with these various task forces that have been appointed, I propose that we add this issue of authority and oversight to our legislative priority agenda for 2021. And that is a motion.
Do we have a second, or is that a question, Councilor Branch?
It's actually both. I'm going to second the motion, but I also want to bring to light that I know there has been a request and a desire for subpoena power and as part of the oversight of this committee. And I realize, based on the information that the attorney has given, that we do not have that authority. I just ask that as the task force that the governor's office has set up, that they really look into that ability and grant that authority from the General Assembly as we move forward. So, but with that said, in this letter, I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Clerk, that was unanimous. Okay. Next we have Councilor Branch.
Yes, as we continue to, I really say, right some wrongs and recognize the significance that all citizens have played in the founding of this country and the development and the growth of this country. One of the things that we have not done is take the time to pause, to recognize and celebrate those that received their freedom. Though we just celebrated the July 4th and recognized that as a city holiday and it's a national holiday, I think it's time that we also recognize Juneteenth as a holiday for our city staff and city employees. And I move that we amend our 2021 holiday calendar and going forward and add Juneteenth as a recognized city holiday.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilor Branch and a second by Councilor Cox. All in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously, Clerk. Councilor Branch, thank you for moving this forward. And I want to commend the county as well for their work yesterday in honoring Juneteenth as a county holiday. Now we will do that as a city as well. I think Chairman Ford said something about this being a great opportunity to learn about our history. And Commissioner Holmes also said it's not about just Black history, it's also about our history as a country. So I really commend everybody here today for honoring this and helping us move forward. And, you know, some people might say this is a symbolic gesture, but symbolic gestures are also important as are meaningful gestures, and we are working on that. So thank you very much, Councilor Branch. Do you have any other comments?
I just have one more thing. Currently, we are, we were scheduled to do a racial equity training as a council. And we are, as we know, down a council member at this time. So I would like to just recommend to my peers and that we delay our training until we have our additional council person on board, but also to look at the training. And I believe we had it been pretty much set up and managed by my previous counselor. But we moved this to our diversity, equity, and inclusion staff office that we just created. But also look at, the training and making sure that we are getting the full benefit. And if we need to make some adjustments or maybe an RFP to make sure that it is truly holistic, that we do that and still have the training in the future. Actually, hopefully this year.
Councilor Cox?
Yes, I would like to second Mr. Branch's motion, as long as it also includes possibly looking into additional vendors in order to make sure we have that holistic approach.
Could we, Councilor Branch, add to that, ask the staff to come back to us with a report at our September meeting? By then, we will have our next counselor in place. This will give you time to kind of look at this from a different perspective. Come back to us with a recommendation at that time. May I add?
Yeah, that's fair. Because I think they're also looking at something for Planning Commission based on what I heard as well. There may be a way for us to tie this in together.
Okay. Clerk, are you clear on that motion? Okay. All right. Motion made and seconded by Councilor Cox. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you. And just for the record, this has nothing to do with our commitment for racial equity training. It's just circumstances have changed, and we want to ensure that whoever is our next counselor from District D also participates in this. So, thank you. Okay, next we have Councilor Stewart.
Thank you. I have just one quick item. In looking ahead to our public hearings tonight, we have a text change on accessory dwelling units. And in that text change, there is a bit about manufactured homes. And rather than get into that specific item, which is actually a much larger conversation during tonight's discussion, I'd like to see if we can't have a larger conversation around manufactured homes, whether that's around tiny homes or prefab or container homes. All of these things are starting to kind of pop up around the country as more affordable options for housing in communities. And so if we could get a staff report on this larger conversation to come back to us in the fall, I would love to see that happen.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you for bringing that up, Counselor. There's a lot of really interesting things going on in manufactured homes area that can provide more affordable options for individuals and families. So thank you. Counselor Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a report today.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Cox.
Yes, I have 3 items. The first item is that I was able to participate this morning in the hearing, the public hearing for the Wakestone Quarry permit. I made some remarks. I'm not going to read them all because it'll take 2 minutes to read them. But just to outline, I emphasized that there are unsettled legal questions regarding the quarry. And I pointed out the negative impacts on Umstead State Park, East Coast Greenway, and Crabtree Creek if the permit is granted. And so what I will do is I will enter my remarks into the record by sending them a copy to the clerk, and then that'll be that. Second topic is we had council over the past several years has talked about doing a disparity study. And I believe that the budget for a disparity study, we don't have a budget for the disparity study in our current budget because of the cost and because of the economic situation that we are in. And so I wanted to ask the manager if there's any way we could do a disparity light study. And I was wondering if you could come back with some ideas. I think we haven't done a disparity study in over 13 years. And at the very least, we want to make sure that we are being equitable in the issuance of our contracts and in our procurement and in the services that we engage in. And so I just wanted to throw that out there to and make that request. And I was wondering if I could get the support of the rest of the council.
Yes.
Yes, if I could really quick. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cox. And just for the sake of the other council members, this has been a topic for basically the last 2 years. We originally had planned, and if you remember at your February retreat before we had the COVID situation, that we had committed to moving forward with the major funding for the study in this year's budget. Obviously, with the economic downturn and the $28 million worth of cuts, we were unable to fund that particular study for this year. However, we would agree that this is a priority and something that does need to move forward. It's really as much a resourcing issue, not only money, but also staff time. And so what I would suggest, Mr. Cox, is so we can level set definitions and understanding is bring this back at a future council meeting, and we'll put it on the agenda and sort of brief you about what a disparity study is, what does it take, almost like maybe a work session topic. And then we can talk about funding alternatives. Now, again, the funding is a big issue because it's usually so expensive. Right. But I do think also there would be some value in the council maybe getting a little bit more informed about what that means. I think that sometimes there's wording around that has a lot of different meanings. So if I could ask maybe some flexibility and bring this back as a topic at a future work session, maybe September or so, and then we can talk about options. We agree it's a priority. It's just a matter of the size of funding. And there may be some options to cut it down, although from my experience, once you get into the legal obligations, it's hard to do that. But let's talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. And my last topic is, it goes back to the
Councilor Cox, just let me take everybody's good with that, right? Head nod? Good? Okay. We're good. Thank you.
Okay. So the last item, it has to do with our plans to move forward with a mental health unit. And I want to throw out there this program. It's called Cahoots. It's in Eugene, Oregon. It's been in the news lately. I see that Denver is developing a program called STAR, which is based on Cahoots. And it's a nonprofit. What they do is they have a nonprofit organization that the police department partners with, and they are able to send this group of healthcare professionals out to specific kinds of 911 calls. These might be suicide calls, drug overdoses, emotional problems. There's a variety of things that they can become involved in. The people do not carry guns. It's help that's provided in a non-threatening manner. And I would just ask that as part of looking at forming a unit for mental health, that we take a look at the Cahoots program. It looks very successful, and I want to encourage that we take a look at it.
Yep, Mayor, if I could, several of you actually have sent several articles, and we've been reading a few other ones as well. I'm actually participating next week in a large city executive forum special Zoom call on this topic as well. So what I would suggest, Mr. Cox, is maybe we'll just fold that into all the different material that we're getting on the subject.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And that's all I have.
That would also fall under the earlier request to come back to us with a report on status and progress that you're making.
Right, and if I could, Mayor, I think we're going to have multiple conversations about this, so I don't know if we'll get all of that by next meeting, but we'll include that as a part of the review.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, Councilor Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've had 2 informal requests come before me in my district to change street names, city street names that are racially offensive to residents that live on that street. And as I understand it, the current process for city street name changes does not include that rationale or category. So what I'd like to do is ask staff to look into this issue and bring back to us next meeting just updated language that would include that rationale or that category in a public process type of manner for us to look at to respond to this issue in this time and place that we are right now. So, City Manager.
Yes, Mayor, if that's okay. Yeah, Councilmember Knight, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, we can bring that back at the next meeting and provide some options. It may be that the current criteria doesn't necessarily have to be explicit about that in order to still facilitate the name change, but if the council wants that language specificity, we can certainly provide it. What Councilmember Knight is referring to is that there is an existing ordinance that outlines specifically how the process works to create a name change, and it touches multiple departments: IT, transportation, planning and development. And so there is an existing process. At the end of the day, the council can change a street name for whatever you want to. It's an open authority, but it doesn't specifically outline that as a criteria. So we can provide you with that language option if you want that to be in there. And then for the citizens, they can bring forward those petitions to change the street names.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Last thing, I just look forward to working with the public and council on filling the vacancy in District D in the next week. And we've already gotten some good candidates and look forward to getting more and working through a good process to fill that seat. So thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I have 4 items. One is real quick. I wanted to announce the appointment of Councilmember Branch to the Dix Park Leadership Committee. Thank you for volunteering to serve on that very important board. I also wanted to announce that I was appointed to the U.S. Conference of Mayors Community Development and Housing Standing Committee, which I think will be a great learning experience, especially as we continue to have discussions about housing affordability. Also, I wanted to ask the manager for an update in the city manager's report on the status of our shelter situation for our homeless community. You know, COVID limited access to the Wake County shelters. At one point, I believe hotels were used to house some people who had been diagnosed with COVID and others who may have been exposed. I just would like to get a report on that current situation and just learn a little more about where we are and dealing with that situation. It's been very difficult. And then the 4th item, you just mentioned, Councilor Knight, and that is I wanted to remind everybody that we are accepting applications for our District D seat. And the deadline to apply is 4 o'clock on Friday. Council, we will be asking you this weekend to submit ballots. I believe with it closing at 4 o'clock, you will get the ballots Friday evening. Please have your first ballot in by 10 a.m. on Saturday morning with your top 5 choices for the virtual meeting. This doesn't mean this is who we're voting for. These are the 5 people that you want to include in the virtual meeting. Want to also remind everybody is that virtual meeting candidates forum will be held on at 3 o'clock on Sunday. So and then if you are a District D resident and there's a question that you would like to ask, please get that question submitted to the city clerk. She will forward that to the moderator of the forum. City Attorney, I'm going to ask you to just kind of go over the rules of balloting that you and the clerk have brought forward.
Thank you. I may actually ask the clerk to chime in here. I think the idea is each person will get a ballot and they will have the entire list by that time. Each council member will be asked to vote for 5 people that they would like to hear from at the forum. Clerk, I believe that there is a possibility, the idea is that each of the 5 should get 5 votes. So that may happen on the first time, but it may not, in which case that the clerk would then send a subsequent ballot. So it may be a good idea if we have some time cutoffs. And Gail, maybe you can chime in here and let everyone know basically what you think about that, since you're going to be doing the legwork on this.
It's our intent to get the first ballot to you early Friday evening. The cutoff's at 4 o'clock, and Cassidy in my office is already setting them up and setting the ballot up. And we will send you a total packet of everything that has been submitted. And I think the plan is to have it alphabetically. As the mayor just said, get your ballot back to us by 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. And depending on what happens there, hopefully we could get you another ballot back out within an hour if needed. I think our hope and desire is that we will have 5 people who have received 5 votes no later than about 3 p.m. 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, so that the people who received the 5 votes can be notified and get the questions over to the moderator and go from there. But the assistant clerk Cassidy has been doing a great job of keeping you informed of who has submitted and is working on getting the ballots to you immediately. If you have any suggestions or whatever, let me know.
What I would suggest is that we set some times so the council members know what to expect. Let's plan on having our first ballot in by 10 a.m. The second ballot returned to the clerk's office by noon. And if we need a third, that it be by 2 o'clock. And you can notify them, get them the link to the WebEx and all the other details. So everybody, I think just
10, 12, and 2.
10, 12, and 2. Get your ballots back in. Thank you. Oh, and one thing I would recommend, I have been reading every day when Cassidy sends us the list of applicants. I've been reading that every night, so that way I'm not reading 20 or more applications on Friday. I've been doing it gradually. We have some very impressive candidates, and I would encourage you to do the same and make sure you're reading along the way. So on Friday, you'll be well prepared to start really analyzing and getting down into the weeds on who you think 5 good candidates would be for the public to hear from and us to hear from. Yes, Councilor Knight.
Madam Mayor, just because this is such a unique process, I'd like to ask the city attorney, is there any limitation between interaction between current sitting councilors and candidates? Just for the public's knowledge of this.
No, there is not any limitation. Well, you can't get 5 of you together and have a meeting with any one of them, but short of a public meeting violation, there is not any limitation. I would tell you that if you are communicating with them in writing, that those are public records as well. So those are the things to note. And, as long as you've got less than a quorum, there's no law that would prohibit you from talking with the candidates.
Thank you.
Please keep in mind optics. Okay, Councilor Stewart.
And I think it's worth sharing for folks watching and the public that we did put all of the applications on the website. I don't know that we have officially announced that, but it's now up on the website to my knowledge.
That is correct.
Great. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
And they go up at about 5 o'clock each afternoon, and it's cumulative. It'll have the ones that have been submitted previously and give you, a person can look at the list and see everybody who has submitted at once.
Okay. Any questions on that process? All right, great. We are now on to the clerk for appointments.
Okay, the first item, Appearance Commission, you have 1 vacancy. Mr. Buzzy received 1 vote. Chris Roberts received 5, so would be appointed. On the RHDC, the 3 that were recommended by the nominations committee and nominated by council members, Versailles Height, John Reese, and Susan Singer received 6 votes each, so the 3 of those would be appointed. And let me catch up with you here. Under nominations, the last thing is the Police Advisory Board, the designation of terms. You made the appointments the last meeting and held over to determine if we were going to do 2-year terms, staggered terms, or whatever. And I think you may have been discussing this, and I would ask for your direction.
Well, Councilor Melton had a recommendation that I'd like for him to share with all of us.
Yeah, I've served on a couple of boards that were recently created in their first term. And in both of those instances, the board, we decided the terms, designated the term, whether it was going to be staggered, who's going to have a 1-year term, who's going to have a 2-year term. So I suggest that we ask this Police Advisory Board in one of their first meetings to come up with this guidelines themselves. I think it'll give them some autonomy. I think it's appropriate for them to decide. And if for some reason they can't, then we can look at it. But that would be my recommendation.
They will also be selecting a chair, correct?
Yes, I assume all of that will take place at the organization meeting.
Okay.
And if that's direction of council, I will, officially notify them that they were appointed, and at their organizational meeting can come up with the terms and let me know.
Okay.
Yep, I agree with Councilor Milton.
Okay, we all good with that?
Okay, and on the same, we have sort of the same situation with the Hispanic and Immigrant Committee as to whether they should be 2-year terms or you want them to follow the same process.
Let's let them follow the same process.
Okay. And also, just for the record, there are several members that were appointed on that board that live outside of the city. However, they are associated with professional groups that are based in Raleigh that you had indicated you would like to have representation on from those groups. So just for the record, indicate that you realize that they are outside the city limits and this is okay with you and your desires.
As long as they are representing those professional organizations that we identified at the beginning of this process, that is fine. What I would say, just for clarity's sake, if they leave that organization and say there's a new executive director or whatnot, they should probably resign and the new executive director should be looked at. I mean, we pick those specific organizations because of their deep roots in the community. So we want to ensure that they are there representing that organization in the community. Yes, City Attorney?
The code does say there's a residency requirement, but you can waive it. Right. So I think you probably need a vote to.
Right. So I will make a motion to waive the residency requirement for the Hispanic and Immigration Commission. But I want to have clarity in that those representing professional organizations are the ones who can live outside the city limits.
Very good.
Do I have a second? Councilor Melton, thank you. All in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
Okay, under nominations, Appearance Commission, the term of Brandy Thompson is expiring and she is not eligible for reappointment due to length of service. So you have one position that we're seeking nominations. Okay, the next is the Greater Raleigh Convention and Visitors Bureau. You have 4 terms that are expiring, and this group is a little bit different in that 5 of the people who serve are recommendations from the owners of the hotel, motel, and taxable establishments, and you receive recommendations from that group as to who they would like to see appointed. Now, I don't think you have to take those recommendations, but that's the way it's outlined. So under that, we have 2 terms, Leon Cox and Niall Hanley. Their terms are expiring, and the association, they would like to be considered for reappointment, and the association recommends reappointment. Also, the term of convention and tourist and convention related slot, Sandy McDonald, who is an at-large representative, term is expiring. She is eligible for reappointment, and the board also supports her reappointment. So that is what is before you. You can make nominations, confirm, or hold it over for consideration.
Council Melton?
Yeah, I move to accept the committee recommended nominees.
Do we have a second? Council Branch is seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously. Clerk?
And so just to clarify it now, are they going to be on a ballot next week, or did we just appoint them?
It's my understanding you just appointed.
Yes, appointed them.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Very good.
Wanted to double check.
And I appreciate that. And I think as I was reading them out, I missed a term, the one of Mike Smith that is recommended, Sandy McDonald and Mike Smith. So I'm going to assume that your recommendation was to appoint all 4. Okay, the next is Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. You have 2 terms that are expiring, Dave Tom and Dr. Carol Love. Both are eligible for reappointment, would like to be considered for reappointment, and you receive their attendance record.
Councilor Branch?
I move for reappointment of Mr. Tom and Dr. Love.
Do we have a second? Councilor Buffkin? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Clerk, passes unanimously.
The next is the Substance Use Advisory Board. You have a resignation from Donald McDonald, so there's one one slot to consider. So that will, if you have no recommendations at this point, that will appear on the next ballot for nominations at that point. And that's all I have on nominations and appointments.
Okay, thank you, Clerk. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just one item, and it's a follow-up from the last meeting. During my report at the June 16th meeting, I informed council that our staff had prepared a draft of to the City of Raleigh Animal Control Ordinance relating to animal shelter and extreme weather. Council voted to bring that back today for a vote on the ordinance. It is attached to the board docs item on the agenda. So it is ready for adoption. The highlights, if you will, are it clarifies the definition of adequate feed, adequate water, and adequate shelter. It defines extreme weather. It creates a clear requirement for what adequate shelter is during extreme weather and other related items. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer it. Otherwise, if you're ready, you can vote. Councilor Melton.
Yeah, I just want to, my own recollection and for council and the public, this was something that was brought up to prior councils. We initiated it earlier in our term, and I believe your office worked with animal control, the police department, and reviewed statutes from other similarly situated municipalities to come up with an ordinance that was appropriately measured.
That's correct. One of our police attorneys worked very closely with animal control. There are some backup memos that were in the city manager's report, I think, back in October. That has a chart that shows, numerous different municipalities across the United States and what their requirements are. And these are the ones that our animal control staff thought were the most effective and the most needed.
Okay, with that then, I would move to adopt the ordinance that amends the City of Raleigh animal control regulations relating to animal shelter and extreme weather.
Do we have a second? Counselor Buffkin. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city clerk.
You received in your agenda packet copies of the minutes of the June 9 work session, June 15 budget work session, June 16 regular session, and June 30th special session for consideration of approval.
Move for approval.
Do we have a second? Counselor Stewart, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously.
And that is all I have.
Okay, next, I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute break. We are going to enter closed session. I will read that motion and ask for a second. Motion is in order to enter closed session pursuant to GS 143-318.1 AC to consult with the city attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to give instructions concerning the handling and or settlement of a potential claim. Also, GS 143-318.1 A4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses within the city, including consideration of economic development incentives that may be offered to entities considering such expansion. So moved. Do I have a second? Councilor Branch, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. I'm going to ask that everybody mute your phones and turn off your video and be back here. Let's see, it's 3:46. Be back here at about 3:55. Okay? All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you. We have just ended closed session. I'm here to just report out that we received an update from city staff on specific items and provided direction on how to proceed. Thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned.